Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Daily Audio Stash is where responsible marijuana smokers listen in on the latest news about cannabis, hear the voices of the marijuana law reform movement in special segments and interviews, and kick back with comedy and music no other podcast can offer. It's NORML's Daily Audio Stash. More information at normalaudiostash.com. Our news today. Earn cash and end prohibition with NORML's Cafe Press affiliate program. NORML chapter webmasters, website designers, and MySpace and Facebook users, as well as bloggers, can now help end marijuana prohibition and earn extra cash at the same time. NORML has launched a Cafe Press affiliate program in time for holiday shopping. Using easy cut-and-paste HTML codes on your website or blog can earn up to 20% of total sales made when visitors buy through the affiliate links. Joining us to discuss the new program is Erin Dame, NORML's National Outreach Coordinator. Erin, what kinds of products are available for folks to sell as Cafe Press affiliates?
Anything that we offer under Cafe Press, so any NORML item like mugs or pillows or, clothes that you would want to give out for Christmas, you can always do that. And basically we've set it up so you can become a Cafe Press affiliate, and Cafe Press is who we get a lot of our products from. So by becoming this affiliate, when you or others buy things from Cafe Press from you, you would earn 20%. You would also help NORML and just, help spread the word about marijuana law reform.
And this is a rare opportunity to make a little extra money while doing some important activism, and an easy thing to do for anyone with a website or a blog.
Right, exactly. It's completely, self-explanatory for anyone that wanted to add it not only to their website or their blog, but also to MySpace, or just any kind of, things where you can put up a link, put up a little detail, and like I said, anyone who goes through you, you would earn this 20% of their purchases. So it is a really great opportunity.
And NORML has created a wonderful array of products from t-shirts, sweatshirts, ashtrays, stickers, throw pillows, and travel bags that all bear the NORML logo.
Yeah, there's actually items for any kind of holiday shopper. Like you said, pillows. There are also little stocking stuffers like magnets, buttons, there are mugs, just different kind of things to get people prepared for winter all over the country.
Erin, this also sounds like the perfect way for a campus NORML chapter to generate club revenue. Use these affiliate program links, send friends and parents to the site for holiday shopping, and then put the commission right back into the NORML club.
Right. This is exactly why we need something with Cafe Press like this because, especially for our campus chapters, it's hard for them to raise money. A lot of them have to have, funding proposals into their school. But, if they have that MySpace page, if they have, different websites for their student chapters, then they can also put these Cafe Press affiliate links on there and then use that 20% off of each purchase as their main source of fundraising for their chapter. So, it's a great opportunity for everyone, not just the city chapters or the state chapters.
Listeners can sign up for the Cafe Press affiliate program with links we have at normalaudiostash.com. Then use the Cafe Press affiliate ID number in links from NORML.org. When visitors buy NORML items, affiliates get a check from Cafe Press for a commission. This program can be used by anyone wishing to promote the NORML Foundation and end marijuana prohibition. NORML is committed to involving individuals online through direct activism and special programs. Again, listeners can join the NORML Cafe Press affiliate program with links at normalaudiostash.com. Make a little extra holiday cash and a big impact on marijuana law reform. Wednesdays here on the Audio Stash, we get the chance to discuss the latest scientific research regarding marijuana with Dr. Mitch Earleywine. Mitch is professor of psychology at State University of New York and author of the book Understanding Marijuana, A New Look at the Scientific Evidence, and editor of the new book Pot Politics. We have links to the books at normalaudiostash.com. Mitch, welcome back to the Audio Stash today.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Always great to speak with you, Mitch. Seems like there is important new data coming out every week here at the end of 2006. And this week, researchers at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center released a study entitled in part, quote, Examination of the Gateway Hypothesis, close quote. And this one could have been headline Teen Marijuana Use Not a Gateway. First, Mitch, in this study, they follow the same group of boys over 12 years. That must have been very difficult to accomplish, but it must have made for particularly good data.
This is a superb research group who's worked really, really hard to keep track of these folks. As you mentioned, they start when these boys are basically just 10 to 12 years old, and they've been following up now some of them are 22 years old. It's my friend Ralph Tarter at the University of Pittsburgh, and they do a lot of things to keep these participants motivated. But as you can imagine, you do lose the occasional participant, but they didn't lose anybody who would have clearly messed up the results. And the bottom line, like you said, is that this gateway notion that somehow marijuana creates a thirst for hard drugs the way salt makes us thirsty or something is clearly just not true.
So, Mitch, is there any real sequence that people follow into using legal drugs or prohibited substances?
There is always a subset of folks who generally goes through the standard, heavy caffeine, then nicotine, then alcohol, then cannabis, then some hard drug. But as you can imagine, particularly as people have more and more pharmaceuticals available from their parents, this trajectory is no longer the be-all and end-all, and using any one drug is no guarantee of using another drug, and people don't always use in this order. So as Dr. Tarter's data suggests right here, about a fifth of the sample did not actually use marijuana after alcohol and cigarettes. In fact, they went the other way. Some folks used marijuana prior to that. We've got some treatment samples, including a study that came out years ago by a guy named Blaze, that suggests that up to a third of folks in treatment for crack or hard drug stuff ended up using the hard drugs prior to marijuana. The beat poet Allen Ginsberg, of course, shot heroin before he used marijuana and always called heroin the gateway drug. You can imagine that everybody has their own path to problems, but the other nice message in this set of data is that not everybody developed problems, and the underlying subtext is, in fact, it's the folks who are heavy cigarette smokers and really into alcohol who actually end up running into hard drug problems, and that a lot of these are predicted more by having a rough family environment or not a lot of financial resources, not the use of any particular drug.
They discuss those environmental impacts, especially in the conclusion of this study, that the family environment, the neighborhood environment, and how those factors, and especially the stressful environments there, lead to the quick use of alcohol in particular.
And in fact, I think in these families, alcohol may have been whatever was most available, but I shudder to think what would have happened if more of these kids might have lived in, say, a neighborhood where crack was really accessible. And what drugs would they have turned to first? But I really like this and some new prevention books that have come out that emphasize what do we need really? We need a place where people have enough money to survive, a place where parents have enough time and resources so that they can be affectionate and warm and supervise their kids. And we need to essentially just create programs where kids can learn how to manage their own moods, solve their own problems, and then suddenly the problematic use of the drugs gets to be decreased. And one other thing I really liked about this paper is they really focused on the disorder and not the use. Some of the old gateway studies, it was sort of like, oh my goodness, and then these people tried these hard drugs, as if trying a drug one time was this incredible catastrophe. And in Dr. Tarter's data, you can see they focus on actually developing a disorder, actually developing, alcoholism or marijuana addiction. And sure enough, we find that's much less frequent and intriguingly unrelated to the use of marijuana or the use of marijuana in some certain sequence.
So again, we're talking about a sequence of events or behaviors here, but any addiction, even tobacco, takes time to build up.
Exactly, and what's funny is 100 million Americans have tried marijuana at least once, and most of those don't even try a second time. So clearly there's no, gateway into becoming a marijuana addict. If you use marijuana once, how could it suddenly propel you into this heroin addiction? It's a curious idea, and one that I think people were, sucked into, but the data just don't support anymore.
The UPitt Medical Center press release states here that, quote, the study's findings call into question the long-held belief that has shaped prevention efforts and governmental policy for 6 decades and caused many a parent to panic upon discovering a bag of pot in their child's bedroom, close quote. So, Mitch, can we put this marijuana gateway theory to rest here with this data, especially for parents who might find their son or daughter in possession of a small amount of pot or trying it? Can parents now rest assured that their child's next step is not going to be onto some harder drug?
I never want to make too much of any single study, but this is now the 5th study I can think of just off the top of my head disputing these gateway notions. And I always shudder when I hear about, parents who found a joint in a kid's room and ended up throwing that kid in treatment, basically in like some inpatient program because of that one incident. And I feel like it's such a waste of resources for people who really do need those treatments, for one thing, but also kind of an alarmist reaction to what could be a real nice opportunity to have a discussion about why marijuana is not for teens instead of some kind of punitive, let me hold a hammer over your head threat.
Mitch, there was a subgroup in this study who did use marijuana before anything else, but the researchers pointed out that those who used marijuana before alcohol or tobacco did so largely because it was convenient and not because these individuals had some sort of addictive personality.
In fact, that was so correlated with having that rough environment. So the worse the physical neighborhood, the more likely someone was to have marijuana be accessible, and then the more likely they were to try it first. And then any result that might have led to a problem was probably more a product of being in a rough physical environment and all the correlates of that, like not having a lot of parental supervision, not the actual chemical response to marijuana. I don't want people to misinterpret this and say marijuana is good for kids because, as we've discussed before, early adolescent heavy use is hard on brain development and decreases IQ in at least one study. But I don't want folks to suddenly think just preventing marijuana use is going to decrease all drug problems, and that, keeping this in the illicit market is somehow a good way to keep this out of the hands of kids. As we've discussed before, the University of Michigan data suggest that kids say it's easier to get marijuana than beer. Why is that? Well, you can go to a dealer and not get carded. If you go to a liquor store, you do.
So this is what it comes down to in our overall approach to prohibition policy in America right now. This so-called gateway theory is such the mantra of the ONDCP and DEA and pretty much anyone in opposition to prohibition reform efforts. And this study and others are proving there is just no science to that gateway argument. So, Mitch, what started the government on their just crazy gateway rhetoric?
The very first studies done by Candel years and years ago did show that about 80% of the people made this kind of progression from usually alcohol to cigarettes to marijuana. And they always say, look, every heroin user we ever talked to started with marijuana. Well, there are 100 million people who've tried marijuana, and there may be 6 million heroin addicts in the entire United States. So clearly it's not much of a gateway just based on those raw numbers. But often you'll see studies where anybody who doesn't use the drugs in the order of the gateway hypothesis is excluded from the analyses. So I feel like we've been told based on one small set of work that there's this progression, but also anything that's counter to that progression tends to never even show up in the journals. I'm so glad that Dr. Tartar got these data out, and I feel like there are probably, half a dozen other studies like this that are sitting in the file drawers of researchers around the country because people know the gateway hypothesis is false, but they don't want to fight that battle to try to get their data published.
Aha, that is very interesting, Mitch. Also, when we talk about policy, it sounds like science is really giving us the real tools for addiction prevention out there. That a better neighborhood environment, better and more involved parents, and perhaps a greater balance and awareness of ourselves as individuals, our own personalities. These are the things that can be the most successful in preventing addiction in our communities and in our families.
Absolutely, and there is no magic bullet, one session fixes all children, but people with parenting programs that last 12 weeks to a year those kids tend to grow up with a lot more skills. They're a lot more popular with their classmates, and they may try drugs at comparable rates, but they don't develop drug problems at the same rates as these kids who are growing up in neglected neighborhoods with schools that are, overwhelmed with too many students and not enough support.
And it's not that there isn't an important community policing role and function here for law enforcement, but this tough on crime, tough on drugs approach that we've been using and still use today is clearly not the answer.
Well, Matt Klein had some data suggesting that if you put one cop on the beat who would walk around and really be a part of the community, that would be great. But sending people in who aren't really part of that neighborhood and just having them, beat people up and bust people at every intermittent period is, of course, not going to work, and it creates hostility against law enforcement that is completely undeserved and inappropriate.
Mitch, we've touched on this in past segments, but because this study deals specifically with teen marijuana use, let's ask the question today. If you are a parent who finds that your child is experimenting with pot or is in possession of a small amount of cannabis, what's the best approach to talk with a teenager about marijuana use without giving them false gateway information?
I think this is an opportunity to close our mouths and actually listen. I've heard too many teens tell me that adults listen with their mouths open, and it drives them absolutely crazy. I would, in that circumstance, say, do you want to tell me about this? And then be completely quiet and let as much come out as possible. And that's where the opportunity is going to be there to actually improve a relationship with a child rather than berate a child about a single behavior. The things that could come out from that kind of interaction have such incredible potential and could actually put a silver lining on what might be a pretty negative thing.
And Mitch, how can adult American cannabis consumers bring up this topic with their children about marijuana use, even if it's not in the context of the parents catching their kids with a joint? How do pot smokers talk to their kids about pot?
It's funny you should ask, because I'm actually working on a book on this topic called Marijuana's Not for Kids. And I think like a lot of things, like chainsaws and driving and R-rated movies, there are things that are appropriate for adults that aren't appropriate for children. And I think having that conversation is good, and the earlier you start, the better. The other night, my 5-year-old and I were listening to a Janis Joplin album and talking about Janis Joplin, and I got it into an opportunity to say, she died from drug problems, and that was a real shame. And it kind of opened up a curious dialogue, even with a 5-year-old, to kind of lay this groundwork to say, there's a possibility that people create harms from drugs, and we're going to have that be an okay topic even though you're only 5. And if your children are already older, here's another opportunity to say, hey, I'm willing to listen, and to then sincerely listen when they talk about these things. And it's astounding how once they, essentially put their trust in you, you can say the things that are really true, as you can see on the NORML website or in Understanding Marijuana or Marijuana Myths, Marijuana Facts, any of the books that are out there, and make it clear that you're with them, but that this is not something for children because the data suggests it really does hurt development, so we want to see you wait.
And are we just leaving these discussions up to schools or television too much? Are parents just staying too silent on these topics?
I don't think it's anybody's fault so much as just we're all so busy. And we don't see the opportunities when they're out there. But in fact, if you turn on the radio or turn on the TV, you're bound to get just a little opportunity. And if you don't turn it into a lecture, but into a simple couple of questions, you'll be surprised how it doesn't take a lot of time, and yet it still plants really nice seeds about how it's okay to talk to me about drugs, and I don't want you to develop problems with them.
Mitch, this has been another absolutely fascinating conversation around this study from the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Examination of the Gateway Hypothesis. We have links to the study at normalaudio-stash.com. Mitch, I really appreciate you joining us here each week, and I personally look forward to it every Wednesday.
Always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Dr. Mitch Earleywine is a professor of psychology at State University of New York and author of the book Understanding Marijuana, A New Look at the Scientific Evidence, and editor of the new book Pot Politics. We have links to the books at normalaudio-stash.com. Dr. Earleywine joins us every Wednesday here on the Audio Stash. Check the Audio Stash archive at normalaudio-stash.com for a separate archive of our conversations. Key West, Florida. The big skies, sun-baked sand, turquoise water, barefoot bars, and mellow residents are some of the most beautiful parts of this country. Each year, the NORML Legal Committee holds the annual Key West Legal Seminars for criminal defense attorneys and members of the NLC. The annual gathering, featuring some of the top defense lawyers in the nation, was held last week. And while the rest of the country was gripped in snow and cold weather, the presence of NORML's like-minded lawyers kept the sun out in southern Florida. Alan St. Pierre, NORML's executive director, joins us today for a rundown of the seminars in Key West. Alan, welcome back to the Audio Stash today.
Hey, Chris.
And welcome back to the cold East Coast weather. First, tell us, how was it down there in Key West last week?
Well, there is a method to our madness when it comes to choosing where we're going to hold our legal seminars and conferences. And yes, Key West was terrific weather. It was the great American tropical experience, if you will, and I presume everybody had a terrific time.
And Alan, tell us about some of the lectures given in Key West last week at these NORML legal seminars.
Sure. Well, these presentations are meant to be the premier seminars in the United States to teach lawyers about the best ways to represent people that are drawn into the criminal justice system, mainly because of marijuana prohibition. So some of the lectures we had were knock and announce, the evolution and de-evolution of the common law doctrine. And of course, this was so timely considering the terrible death in Atlanta 1 week before of the government essentially knocking down this old woman's door, without even barely announcing themselves. That was a no-knock warrant, and it killed that old woman. And so 1 week later, having a lecture to lawyers on how to represent clients who are caught up in these no-knock warrants couldn't have been more timely. We had advanced DUI motions practices as the government tries to ensnare and prosecute more citizens who they claim have been using marijuana before they were driving. That is clearly a large and burgeoning area of the law. We also had some great lectures on picking a jury in a marijuana case and the subtleties and the uniqueness of that. We had a great lecture from Geraldine Merritt about anti-terrorism laws and the war on drugs and how those things have been conflated together. We had a terrific lecture from Matthew Cuman from San Francisco area. He gave a lecture on RFRA, which is the Religious Restoration and Freedom Act. And he talked about how potentially that federal law might be able to be used in federal prosecutions to stop people from going to prison if they in fact legitimately use marijuana as a religious sacrament. And probably one of my favorite lectures this time around was put on by John Zwirling, who did no more than re-show a videotape from the 1986 NORML conference in Portland, Oregon, where that was the first time that a state really, and with great conscience, tried to put a ballot initiative for the voters to vote to make marijuana legal. It was called OMI, Oregon Marijuana Initiative, and a lawyer named John Flower Marks gave a lecture there about, yes, the discussion is about marijuana, and yes, that's why most of us are in the room. But the reality is the larger discussion is the power of the federal government in the context of the 9th and 10th Amendment to the Constitution. And it is such a timely, prescient lecture that is now almost 20 years old to the day, and every time the lecture is given at a NORML legal seminar and when the lights come up, there is barely a dry eye in the room because the lawyers realize just how crippling, how damaging, how expensive, and how perverse the war on some drugs has become. Mr. Marks gives this lecture 20 years ago and lays out every horror that we're living through right now.
So the lawyers could really see the reality of what we have today with our overboard prohibition enforcement. They could see when that policy shifted on paper the actions that would happen today.
They could see it in their day in, day out practice, and as individuals, lawyers often looking forward into the law, precedent as it's known, could see that if you were going to, for example, take away somebody's home for possessing a small amount of cocaine, for example, then you could probably take away somebody's home for possessing a small amount of marijuana, or taking away their children, or taking away their driver's license, or their ability to get a truck driver's license. And John, this lecture is so terrific, and for many years we've had it in our archives here. We've almost exclusively only shown it in two venues. One is to the NLC about every 4 or 5 years, and if you are lucky enough, of the 400 or 500 students a year who apply for a normal internship, and if you're one of the 20 or so every year who get chosen for that, when you come to Washington, D.C., of the 600 hours of videotape that are in our archives, there is a couple of hours that we really request people to take the time and effort to watch, and one of them is this lecture from 1986, which so properly puts in the context of, yes, we are here to discuss and debate marijuana, but what we're really talking about is cognitive liberty, personal autonomy, and where does the power of the federal government end, and where does the autonomy and personal choices of the individual begin?
And Alan, how about that town of Key West itself? NORML has held these seminars there for quite some time. It must be a welcoming community to the NORML message.
It is a terrific community. It's one of the reasons why we've chosen to go down there now for 25 years in a row, and we couldn't be any happier with how the town, the law enforcement officials, the town fathers and mothers greet us, the businesses. I mean, one can walk by and say signs saying, 10% discount for normal lawyers. Wow. Or if you go to a bar, of which there are a few in Key West, and you're wearing normal paraphernalia or normal garb, your money's no good at those bars. The bartenders won't let you pay, and when the customers around you realize that you either work for NORML or you're involved with NORML as a normal lawyer, your money's no good in Key West.
It sounds like Key West is the most welcoming community out here on the East Coast for NORML.
Very welcoming. It's one of the few years we did not actually have the mayor of Key West come and greet us and come to our Saturday night benefit. So it was a terrific event altogether. 130 lawyers attended. They all got their continuing legal education credits, and it provided funding for NORML. But most importantly, it fulfills one of the major charters of NORML, and that is to educate the public, and in this case, most specifically, educate lawyers about how to best represent their clients who are ensnared in marijuana prohibition-related laws.
Well, Alan, thanks again for joining us here today on the Audio Stash to do this roundup of the Key West legal seminars.
My pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Alan St. Pierre is NORML's executive director. The NORML Legal Committee is always seeking new members. If you're a lawyer interested in joining or attending NORML's legal seminars, we have links at NORMLAudiostash.com.
Almost busted in Laredo, but for reasons that I'd rather not disclose.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson. For tens of thousands of seriously ill Americans, medical marijuana is the only thing that relieves their pain and suffering and permits them to lead a normal life. Yet, medical marijuana patients continue to be arrested in 39 states and under federal law. It's time we legalize the medical use of marijuana all across this country when a physician recommends its use. It's time we stop treating patients like criminals. To learn what you can do to help, please contact NORML at www.norml.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORML.
For the ride.
This has been NORML's Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Thanks to Podshow.com for all the great pod-safe music. We feature the band Carne Cruda as our theme. Make sure you visit our website at NORMLAudiostash.com. That's NORMLAudiostash.com for more information about every day's show. Thanks to Red Aphid Interactive Media for the podcasting technology. We're back at 4:20 tomorrow. If you listen to the Audio Stash, cast your vote at Podcast Alley or other podcast directory services. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Thanks for listening today. See you at 4:20 tomorrow. The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redaphid.com.